Hello everyone, it's July 27th Monday. Let's start the closing bell live. I'm Hong Soon Haye. We're already into the last week of July and we have about 10 minutes left until the market closes today. Overall, the market has been fluctuating since the start, especially the KOSPI. The Kosdaq has been stable from the beginning, but the KOSPI took a while to find its direction. However, it's gaining some momentum now. Let's check the indices. The KOSPI is up 1.15%, currently at 6767. The Kosdaq is up 2%, sitting at 764. The Kosdaq hit 6800 earlier today, but also dropped to 6500, showing volatility of about 200 to 300 points. The Kosdaq's highest point today was 780, and it's currently at 764. Both markets are seeing foreign selling today, while individuals are buying in the KOSPI and selling in the Kosdaq, with institutions buying in both markets. The number of rising stocks in the KOSPI is similar to the number of falling ones, but slightly more are rising. In the Kosdaq, 999 stocks are up and about 640 are down. Let's discuss key points for this week with our guests, Director Kim Jang-Rayol and CEO Lee Geon-hee. Welcome.
Hello, nice to see you.
Great to see you. Time flies, doesn't it? July only has 1 week left. Let's hear your thoughts on the market this last Monday of July. Director?
Well, as always, it's been quite volatile.
Indeed.
Yes, the fluctuations were significant. Excluding some factors, the main issues affecting the market were the San Francisco news and the listing of ChangXin Memory. Those had the biggest impact. We need to analyze those first. Of course, falling oil prices helped a bit, but overall, when the market started to rise and then drop significantly, it was likely due to the ChangXin Memory effect. ChangXin Memory rose more than 5 times.
6 times.
6 times.
Yes, about 500%.
Right.
There's a forecast.
17 times.
Yes.
Yeah.
This is based on this year.
This year, our prices are 3 times higher than our country. For next year, we expect a 60% growth. They primarily deal with wafer tubes, so their growth seems higher than ours, which makes sense. When we saw a 470% increase, how about a tenfold rise? This year, we're expecting 60% growth, but next year could see a tenfold drop. That likely impacted the morning session. Looking at it, our San Francisco situation isn't exactly an MOU or LTA, but it's still something, which means visibility has improved. So it makes sense to bounce back. Yes, I'm glad it has rebounded to that extent.
Understood. The market started shaking around 10 a.m. and as the center head mentioned, the ChangXin Memory listing issue seemed to have influenced that. However, it's still showing some resilience. What are your thoughts, CEO?
Actually, the initial rise was due to the AI summit, but with the CXMT listing, it started to decline. Right from 9 a.m., it dropped significantly by 10 a.m., but now it's slowly recovering in the afternoon. So it's not a sharp rebound. It's a mixed bag of good and bad news. The positive was the impact of the San Francisco AI Summit, benefiting companies like Naver and Samsung SDS, while Samsung Electronics and Hynix faced some pressure from the CXMT listing in the morning. Meanwhile, neglected sectors and stocks like Hybe and Samyang Foods have surged. Companies like Woori Financial Group have also been in the spotlight due to share buybacks. I mentioned that Naver might get an investment from Nvidia, and they actually invested 4.5%. Right, so with those issues coming up, we're still in a mix of good and bad news. Our center head analyzed CXMT very well, but people keep asking if this will continue. You can think of it like SpaceX. It initially surged, but I think it will be hard for the value to sustain itself alone. I expect it might come down a bit.
Yes, understood. You've looked at the overall market situation. It would be good to analyze the supply and demand as well. CEO, what do you think about that?
Supply and demand.
People are asking for that information.
Well, today foreign investors have been selling physical stocks, but I think they might buy futures. No, I'm not sure why they're selling physical stocks, possibly to buy CXMT, but they've been selling since this morning. I thought they might buy some futures, but they keep selling. So it's important to see if they will sell more in the latter part of the day. Nowadays, the period after 3:30 p.m. is crucial, and we need to see if they will push the market back up. Based on the current trend, I think they might sell more, so tomorrow's market might not be easy. Yes, since the US market dropped significantly today, we could have started lower, but the summit provided some defense. However, it's uncertain whether this will last just for a day. If it's not a fundamental issue, we might see some positive buying momentum. If individuals continue to buy actively over 2 days alongside institutions, they could counter the foreign selling. But we'll need to watch until the end of today. The flow of foreign futures doesn't seem very positive.
I understand. After the deadline, please check the supply again. You mentioned that the director was influenced by the San Francisco AI declaration and the listing of ChangXin Memory. Considering how the US market closed last Friday, our market might have reacted negatively today. The Philadelphia Semiconductor Index dropped about 4%, among other issues.
If it hadn't,
Yes.
it wasn't easy. Yes, with ChangXin Memory involved. Of course, it's frustrating to see it keep falling after we got out early, but that's that. It seems like it started off tough. However, we benefited from it in the end. We almost saw gains early on, but it was a battle because of ChangXin Memory. Honestly, there are some overreactions with ChangXin Memory. If semiconductor prices drop next year, would they keep buying ChangXin Memory at no loss? That doesn't make sense. But there was definitely an initial effect which negatively impacted us. Without San Francisco, it would have been worse. It could have dropped more, but thankfully, the shock was smoothed out. Thanks to those who went to San Francisco for their input.
It's a 950 billion scale. Over 5 years, the AI mega alliance is nearly 1,400 trillion won in our currency. While it's positive, it's still just an agreement. This is still at the promise stage, right?
So some people view this negatively, saying it's just an MOU. So why all the fuss?
It's not entirely negative, but since it's not a formal contract, we should view it as a good promise rather than a binding agreement.
Yes, but we don't need to be overly cold about it. Yes, it's important to go with the flow. The key point is that Broadcom thinks working with TSMC takes too long.
Yes.
They want to work with Samsung Electronics. That's the biggest news. The talk about SK Hynix and the 750 billion is just something that was already there. Analysts don't predict that far ahead, right? But suggesting a direction for 5 years is significant. Moreover, Naver is actually the biggest beneficiary now. The scale is $10 billion, which is a huge amount compared to Naver's market cap. It's like the money Naver would earn in 6 to 7 years. Brookfield is investing that, and Nvidia also invested about $1 billion in equity. So whether that $1 billion and the $10 billion are separate or combined, the $10 billion scale resolves the market's concerns about Naver's AI data center project.
Yeah.
So this partnership could last longer than expected. As I've mentioned before, it could become a company like CoreWeave.
That's right.
Yes, CoreWeave ended up selling about 10% of its Nvidia shares. Yeah, so Nvidia is making aggressive moves right now, even offering a $250 billion guarantee to ensure OpenAI can invest. They're saying that if you take on debt, we'll back you up. That should lower interest rates a bit, right? Considering all that, the scale of their data centers looks really big. So I think the overall mood will continue to improve. Samsung SDS made an announcement, but there were no specific numbers. Anthropic mentioned something, and SK Telecom released some figures, but it seems like the market already knew that. So the biggest beneficiary of this summit was Naver.
It was Nave.
Yes, that's how I see it.
Naver is up about 8% today. You've consistently pointed out that even when the market wasn't paying much attention, you emphasized why the CEO met with Brookfield. Now there's concrete talk about building a $10 billion global AI factory. An 8% rise for Naver is decent, but those who saw it from pre-market might feel a bit disappointed. Still, it's a solid finish, right?
It is a bit disappointing.
Right.
It is disappointing. Normally, it would have gone up over 20%. But now some people are selling off, viewing it as a sell-on news situation, and foreign investors seem to be doing the same. When Jensen Huang, the CEO, visited last time, if he had just mentioned the possibility of an investment, it wouldn't have dropped like this. Those who bought on the hype were ready to sell today. I got a lot of questions about it.
Nav.
They were asking if they should sell when Naver goes up. I told them if you want to sell, go ahead. But eventually, they'll have to digest the volume here. The earlier volume is unfortunately a bit messy. Those who jumped in during the last issue are now saying, well, you see, it dropped again this time.
I can't predict how the chart will look later, but all those spikes were due to Nvidia.
Exactly. Since June, the rise has been because of Nvidia, and this is driven by the cloud data centers.
Yes.
Not just the cloud, but also the acquisition of Upbit by Dunamu that caused this rise.
Oh, is that why?
Yes, it's due to the Dunamu acquisition, but the legislation hasn't been processed quickly. The president mentioned it, and they decided to ease regulations. They've dragged this out for over a year, when it could have been resolved sooner. If that gets sorted, Naver could easily reach around 270,000 won without much hesitation.
Understood. Before we discuss specific stocks, you mentioned that Naver seems to be the biggest beneficiary of the San Francisco AI declaration, so I wanted to highlight that.
The size is just right for benefiting, while Samsung Electronics' Foundry is a large amount but seems to take a long time.
200 billion.
People love to see money coming in right.
Right. Got it. Let's check how the market wrapped up and discuss with both of you. The Kospi closed up 0.97% at around 675, while the Kosdaq rose by 2.22%, finishing at 754. Overall, the Kosdaq showed strength from the start today. Although the Kospi weakened a bit, both indices managed to recover. The Kospi had 497 stocks rising and the Kosdaq Kosdaq had one down 7, so there were more gainers in both markets. Foreign investors sold in both the Kospi and Kosdaq, while individuals bought in the Kospi and sold in the Kosdaq. Institutions were net buyers in both markets. The dollar-won exchange rate rose significantly today, nearing 10-1, now at about 1,468-1. Looking at the major stocks, Samsung Electronics and SK Hynix rose by 1.8% and 3.2% respectively. Hynix struggled in the morning but gained momentum later, now around 1.81 million won. Square dropped about 1%, but most other stocks except for Samsung Electromechanics and Samsung Life are in the green. Even Hyundai, which was weak earlier, closed up 0.5% at 400,000 won. Defense stocks, including Hanwha Aerospace, showed weakness today, dropping over 8%. Let's check the top Kosdaq stocks. You can clearly see a lot of green. Starting from the top, only D&D Pharmatech at around 25th place is in the red. Overall, most major stocks are in the green, with a few exceptions like Boronoy and ST Farm showing some red. Let's dive deeper into this with you both. Center Director, do you have any specific issues or market views we should look into?
It's semiconductors. That's a Samsung.
Sounds good.
Well, there's nothing special about the materials sector. It's just that semiconductors are rising, so everything else is following. Since they dropped a lot before, if individual stocks aren't soaring by double digits, you can just see it as a rebound. Samsung Electronics and Hynix are key players here. Hynix had a report come out earlier today, but it didn't have much impact due to CXMT. Shall we take a look? Yes, is it okay to quote this team leader Kim Sun-woo? Yes. Merit Securities released a report on Samsung Electronics and Hynix, raising the target price to 3.1 million won. They made 3 comments on this quarter's outlook, estimating around 60 trillion won, similar to recent lowered forecasts. The key takeaway is that due to significant pre-tax income from non-operating gains, pre-tax profits could reach a staggering 100 trillion won. This stood out. Typically, we evaluate based on operating profit, but they argue that it's different now. Whether that's accepted remains to be seen, but it's worth considering. The 60 trillion won estimate was expected, so the price increase for Hynix and Samsung Electronics is lower. Samsung Electronics saw DRAM prices rise by about 50% and NAND by around 60%. However, Hynix's growth is only about 30-50%. They didn't go into specifics, but there were differences in product mix and negotiation timing. They described this as a narrow view, suggesting that the company is improving. They also mentioned LTA prices, indicating that they haven't finalized anything yet. Like Micron, they stated that they fixed prices for the upcoming quarter, but didn't lower them. It seems Hynix needs to clarify that signing an LTA means more than just securing 3 years' worth of supply. They emphasized that partnerships with big tech, like the stake swap with Naver, are part of this LTA's role. While there aren't concrete details yet, it suggests that market expectations could improve, potentially changing the company's valuation. We'll see if these claims hold true when actual results are released. They predict over 40 trillion won in non-operating gains. As you anticipated, Toshiba's memory division, now Kioxia, has seen a drop today, but we invested in them. They sold SPC1, expecting cumulative profits of around 40 trillion won. There's also SPC2, which is separate. They hold about 14% stake now, down from over 30% due to the first sale. If this is recognized, and if the 60 trillion won estimate is accurate, it could lead to 100 trillion won down the line. They emphasize that non-operating gains shouldn't be viewed as one-off events. They highlighted that acquiring Intel's NAND division and selling it well contributes to competitiveness. This is worth considering. There's also an interesting point about Chairman Choi Tae-won needing funds due to his divorce, which could lead to speculation about Hynix's dividends. They argue that supply shortages will continue into next year. Additionally, the ADA conversion will be unlocked on the 29th. However, since the supply is limited, it's uncertain how much the current premium of nearly 30% will decrease, but it should improve somewhat. They mentioned that since they've made good profits, they will likely implement a shareholder return policy. Samsung is in a similar situation, hence they raised the target price. The profit outlook isn't significantly different from the consensus, but this year's profit has been slightly lowered to around 250 trillion won, while next year's profit is projected at around 400 trillion won. For those not deeply familiar with the company, this report should be quite encouraging. However, given the market atmosphere, it didn't start off positively, partly due to CXMT's performance. This report can be seen as meaningful.
Regarding the LTA Center Director, there were about 6 AI collaborations announced in San Francisco, including a long-term supply contract with Hynix and Nvidia worth 108.5 trillion won.
75 trillion.
Yes. This is part of future plans. It was presented as a guideline.
So you can look at it this way. Let's take a...
Yes.
Please take a look.
Yes.
You probably know the figures. It's $500 billion. The first deal with Nvidia is for $500 billion, which is a letter of intent, LOI. There's a slight difference between LOI and LOU, but I'm not sure what it is. Both are non-binding. However, depending on the relationship, they could progress to an MOU or directly to an LTA, but they are indeed non-binding for now. This $500 billion is the deal with Nvidia for long-term memory supply, and the additional $250 billion seems to include other companies, possibly Microsoft. Overall, the total mentioned is $7.5 trillion, right?
Yeah.
If we calculate, it's about 1,050 trillion won.
Yes.
So that's about 200 trillion won a year. But that's over 5 years. Next year, it won't be 200 trillion, right? Common sense says it might be 50 trillion, but I don't think so. I feel like it'll be around 100 trillion. If we estimate 100 trillion, our sales this year at Hynix are 360 trillion, and next year's sales will exceed 500 trillion. If we set it at 500 trillion, that's a 20% growth, and we should consider that roughly includes everything until next year. But if the following year isn't 100 trillion, and we assume it's tied to an LTA, then it should increase from there. And if it goes well, the proportion will rise.
The guidance should improve.
So a certain brokerage firm predicted Hynix's operating profit to be 180 trillion next year and 50 trillion the year after. But the numbers for 2028 will look strange. And indeed, in that visibility, it's positive. But it's not an LTA yet, though there's a possibility. It's a letter of intent, so we have to be cautious, but it could be accurate. However, it's not confirmed revenue yet.
Yes.
It's not even a backlog of orders, so this is all we need to consider.
People in the chat are saying it doesn't seem binding or significant, so we need to see how quickly this gets started. Of course, we have to keep an eye on it, but the amount is still a rough promise between companies.
It's not a promise, exactly.
Not a promise?
A letter of intent is essentially a statement of intent. It's saying we'd like to try working together. It's not a promise, right? It shouldn't be considered a promise.
It's an intention.
It means we've exchanged intentions.
Right, so it's reasonable to speculate based on the guidance. I hope it turns out that way. That's how it is. But when I hear Chairman Choi Tae-won, it's like Jensen Huang always asks for more whenever we meet. More chips? Yes, exactly. He emphasized more chips. Seeing this trend, we can confirm that the strategic partnership between Nvidia and SK Hynix is closer than expected. And that part has some significance, of course. Yes, I understand. In the chat, someone asked about the sharp drop in SK Hynix today, and I'd like to hear your thoughts on that, along with any materials you've prepared on notable stocks. Yes. Shall we take a look? Yes. First, looking at the stocks that went up, Samsung Electronics and Hynix were a bit weak due to the CXMT listing impact. As I mentioned earlier, Nava did well, and Woori Financial surged after announcing a 150 billion won share buyback. Samyang Foods, Hive, and Silicon 2 are sectors that have been overlooked: food, entertainment, and cosmetics. Today, among cosmetics, Cosmeca Korea and Silicon 2 suddenly surged. Silicon 2's stock had dropped to 8 times lower. It seems to have entered undervalued territory and rebounded. Hive also had news about stopping AI music investments, but it likely rose due to earnings expectations this quarter. Samyang Foods also moved up ahead of good export data. I noted these as symbols because sectors with earnings expectations like Samsung and Hynix react moderately when they rise or fall. Today they rose moderately and fell moderately as well, reflecting that. I can't list everything, so I picked a few representative examples. Yes, SK Hynix suddenly dropped, and that was on the day it hit the upper limit on July 23rd. Many people asked me if they should buy it, and I said I don't think so. The momentum was really strong. In July, when everyone was struggling, it was on a steady upward trend, and there were even talks of it being the next big thing after Hynix. When such discussions arise, it usually indicates a peak. The cost-price index is also showing a peak pattern right now. There was a wave of profit-taking, and the only reason cited was the drop in oil prices. Oil prices fell a bit. Yes, but I think it was more about profit-taking happening all at once. Stocks like SK Ocean Plant, OCI Holdings, and HD Hyundai Energy Solutions didn't drop much because they hadn't risen as much. So there was some short-term profit-taking. The rise of SK Hynix and Ocean Plant was due to SK Telecom building a data center related to AWS, which they were responsible for. But has that ended? No, it hasn't ended yet. Looking at that, I believe it was short-term profit-taking from institutions. This shock will likely be overcome, and it might rise again. However, it could struggle around the 54,001 mark that I drew. It's important to watch if it holds that level. If it breaks down, it could get tricky. So keep an eye on whether it maintains that price. If a stock that surged suddenly breaks below its 11-day moving average, it's usually a good time to cut losses, but that's up to your judgment. Interestingly, stocks with nice charts tend to drop sharply when they do. The gap had widened and it likely reached around 180 at one point based on the 61-day average. That contributed to the drop. Also, among the stocks that rose today, Hanjin Kal is seeing competition for shares and has been rising because of that. Samsung SDS also had good news about a collaboration with Entropy, rising about 3.5% and even hitting 14% at one point. I thought it might reach around 240,000 won, but it peaked at 239,000 won and then dropped. There's some momentum, but there aren't specific numbers yet.
Yes.
If follow-up news comes out like it did for Naver, which mentioned a $10 billion investment and then got a stake from Nvidia, that would be great. But today, that stock only closed up about 8 to 9%, so it wasn't that strong. Also, a company related to immersion cooling, GST, rose nearly 9.9% today. LG Electronics didn't rise much, but they received certification for liquid cooling solutions from Nvidia. If they get a contract with Nvidia, that could be good news. LG Electronics has been consistently releasing good news related to air conditioning. Recently, SNS Tech, which had dropped a lot, rose about 6%, which is interesting. SNS Tech manufactures blank masks and is in talks about whether they will supply Samsung Electronics. They had made some money from China, but have since lost it all this year.
Yeah.
So it would be good to watch whether these stocks rebound.
Since you mentioned the situation with SK Hynix hitting the lower limit, other stocks in the renewable energy sector didn't perform well today.
The defense sector wasn't doing well, and it dropped further because of Hyundai Rotem's performance. Hyundai Rotem didn't just surprise us, it shocked us with its earnings. The results were below expectations, causing Hyundai Rotem's stock to drop 16%, which seems to have affected the ETF as well. So Hanwha Aerospace, LIG, and even Korea Aerospace Industries are all seeing declines together. It's like they're all moving in sync lately. That's how it seems.
Hyundai Rotem has hit its lowest price in a year. Also, I was about to mention that Doosan Fuel Cell hit its lower limit today. SK Ocean Plant dropped 19%. Hyundai Energy Solutions fell 17%. And Hanwha Solutions and CS Wind also dropped significantly. So it seems like oil prices are impacting these stocks. Yes, and while there's the shock from Hyundai Rotem's performance, the situation with the war has also led to some pauses in aggression, which might be influencing market sentiment. Is that having a combined effect?
And I don't think we need to link defense stocks directly to the war. Remember, if a war breaks out, they should skyrocket, but when the fighting resumed, they didn't surge. It seems to be more about performance issues.
Performance issues, specifically Hyundai Rotem's earnings, shock. Got it. Let's hear from the director and then from the representative.
Yes.
What aspects are you keeping an eye on, director?
Whether it's your question or something I mentioned, I'm not sure if you're interested, but there was a downward report on NAND prices.
There's been some talk about NAND lately. What's going on with it?
Should we take a look?
Yes.
The downward forecast came from TrendForce, a market research firm, not a brokerage. This was reported on the 16th, so not many people may have seen it yet. By the way, you might have heard of DRAMexchange.com, which is TrendForce's platform. They significantly lowered the NAND price forecast for next year, specifically for Q3 and Q4. Based on this, Mirae Asset Securities released a report on the 23rd, suggesting that concerns have been addressed. The forecast indicates a drop of 9% to 15% in NAND prices for those quarters. I'll explain the reasons later, but no analysts had predicted such a significant drop for Q3 and Q4. Most expected only a slight decrease of 1% to 3%, so this is indeed bad news. They also provided forecasts for DRAM, which were actually raised compared to previous figures. Since DRAM is a larger market than NAND, this might not shake the market as much. Analysts and the market likely didn't see it that way after the 16th. I heard about this last week, but the main focus is elsewhere. However, looking at the impact from Kioxia and SanDisk, I analyzed the situation. I believe the stock prices have already reflected this. Prices are trending down for Q3 and Q4. If NAND contributes about 20% to overall profits and drops by 10%, that could mean a 2-3% decrease in operating profit. It's concerning, but it's not catastrophic. The reason is that NAND is used in smartphones and PCs, including SSDs for servers. Ironically, the enterprise is expected to drop first, which could be confusing. You can look into what enterprise and client mean. But isn't it said enterprise demand is strong? With servers, shouldn't DRAM prices drop too? Meanwhile, even though smartphone prices are rising, Chinese manufacturers are struggling and NAND prices are still dropping. Mirai Asset entered this as preemptive stockpiling due to skyrocketing NAND prices. They've increased by 100 to 120%, so they might have stocked up early.
Yes, exactly.
So the issue isn't just NAND shortages affecting smartphones. Enterprise shipments are also down. This isn't just about this quarter or next year's first or second quarters, but starting from next year's third quarter. If enterprise server demand drops, then DRAM should also decrease. However, it seems server numbers are still growing by 15-20%. They've actually reduced the SSD capacity per server. This quarter, they're selling about 8 terabytes per server, and that's expected to keep increasing. But then suddenly, why does it drop? I just don't get it. I can't fully understand it. It seems like they've revised their forecasts for enterprise servers. But overall, operating profit is only around 1-3%, right? I want to know why. It seems they're reflecting an increase in supply because NAND is more significant than DRAM, as mentioned earlier.
That's right.
NAND has a lower barrier to entry compared to DRAM. With DRAM, there are lots of concerns about yields and die counts, but theoretically, if YMTC can produce enough, it could shake the DRAM market more easily than the other way around. Samsung, Kioxia, and Hynix are ramping up production in the first half of next year. YMTC is expected to have more supply than those companies starting mid-next year. So this timing could lead to a bigger drop in the second half of next year, which seems to be the trend. Sorry for the long explanation, but if you look at the prices, they drop sharply. Analysts forecast a gradual decline, but there's a chance it could drop even more. The important thing is that DRAM prices are expected. Look at this. Their previous predictions from May to July show an increase.
That's true.
People might think this isn't a big deal, but the key point is that prices seem to be rising and not dropping until the end of the year. This is more positive than analysts expected. So NAND is seen as negative, while DRAM is more positive. They might be wrong, but that's the current view. The same applies to DRAM. We talked about BNK before. Please understand our team leader. They've become quite popular, not in a bad way. BNK predicts DRAM prices will drop by 30% or 28% starting in the third quarter of next year. But looking at the current trend, it's completely different. How do securities firms view this?
Oh, the data is really...
Where did it go?
You couldn't find it?
For DRAM, sorry, I have too much information. But for DRAM, BNK predicts a significant drop. If it goes down like that, a PE ratio of 4 or 5 times is very reasonable. It won't stray from that. And I believe that if things equalize, it could have. What's the point if Samsung and Hynix drop prices?
It
would be a tough competition, but would they survive? So that's not going to happen. But what I saw earlier is completely different. Domestic analysts have a middle ground view. They don't expect prices to keep rising. They predict increases of 10%, 7%, 3%, and 2%. In fact, a 3% increase could flip at any moment. So by around 20,000 next year, prices might drop. The issue is that prices aren't plummeting. This is about trusting LTA. But here, that's not the case, and prices are higher. So I changed my approach. Forget about hegemony. I revised it. I expect prices to drop less than BNK's predictions, and since NAND has a better chance of increasing supply, I took a more conservative stance. If it drops like this isn't my prediction. I lowered NAND prices because of all the talk. Then, Hynix could generate around 250 trillion in operating profit. This year's consensus is 272 trillion, and Kim Sun-woo from Meritz has it lower at 255 trillion. So, according to Kim Sun-woo, there's no change this year or next. Profits aren't increasing. Let's flip that. There won't be a crash like BNK predicts. What do you want to believe? If it's similar or drops by 10%, there won't be a crash in profits. Is that a relief? The stock has dropped significantly. Or do you not believe the 30% rise? So even if the stock goes up, the rebound isn't strong. What do you want to believe?
I want to believe in the center director.
Don't trust me. I might be wrong. If it's 250 trillion, that's similar to this year. And the EPS won't even reach 300,000 won. Based on that, today's stock price before the rise had a PE ratio of 6 times. This year's rise is only about 6.5%. This is right in the middle of the cycle. People are looking at this. What if there's no growth next year? Even at 6 times, it seems cheap. But if supply is completely messed up, there's no need to jump in early. Should I wait and see? Honestly, what's the deal with LTA? Let's talk about it.
The NAND discussion has been ongoing for a week or two now.
There's also been talk in the CT sector that the inventory isn't as high as expected and the inventory period isn't long. So NAND has affected the market and it dropped today, right?
It dropped about 4%.
Yes, that's right. But now it's come back up and it's down 1.6%. So even if prices drop, if the quantity increases, we'll need to keep an eye on that. NAND might be a starting point, but TrendForce has a positive outlook. DRAM is much larger than NAND, about 7 to 8 times our revenue.
The Q is about 4 times that.
It's about 4 times more, yes.
I could see from the data how much you've thought about the NAND side when these discussions come up. I'd like to ask the CEO if the robot didn't perform well today.
The robot, yes, it had a bit of a rebound.
Just a rebound? I thought it was doing better.
Rainbow Robotics hit the lower limit again on Friday, so it seems like it rebounded a bit from that. Overall, the physical AI sector wasn't very strong today, but some robot stocks in the Kosdaq had a slight rebound. Companies like Rainbow Robotics, which is working with Samsung, and Robotiers also showed some recovery. Surgical robots like Goyang might have gone up for different reasons, and Hyundai Mobis rose about 13% today, which is a nice change. Companies like Samyun also went up by around 4%. It looks like there were some technical rebounds in oversold stocks in the Kosdaq today. Recently declining stocks like cosmetics company Cosmeca Korea also bounced back. However, we should be cautious with investments in Kosdaq robot stocks.
Really? Why?
There's nothing concrete here, right? The only plan seems to be from Rainbow Robotics, right? And then Robotiers where?
It's connected with LG.
Yes, it's linked to LG, but the reason Robotiers' stock once performed well, reaching around 54,000 to 56,000 won, was due to issues related to Optimus. Then there was a company called Wonic Holdings, which was working on robotic hands with Meta, but now that company is struggling too. Have you heard that Meta is getting into robotics? No? That's why it's dropping again. There aren't many companies worth watching in the Kosdaq. SPG and the gearbox sector are a bit better, so you might want to keep an eye on SPG, Rainbow Robotics, and Robotiers.
I'm curious, when we talk about robots, we think of Kosdaq. Today, robot companies performed well, but when we think of robots, we think of Hyundai. Hyundai is working on AI in San Francisco with Nvidia to build a robot reference platform, and they're also collaborating with Waymo on autonomous driving. There have been many discussions, but today might be different.
Everyone knows that.
Yes, it's common knowledge.
It's all known and confirmed.
Nothing new.
There's nothing new.
Or maybe more specific numbers.
There weren't any numbers released either. So it seems like it's just a way to prevent further decline. We need more concrete details about the collaborations. The excitement is too high just because the chairman attended the AI summit.
Something new, right?
Exactly.
Or there weren't any specific figures or anything like that.
Soon there will likely be talks about sending personnel to the AI data center related to Hyundai. I believe that's already been discussed. The robot research center won't be built in Saemangjum. It will be in Munjeongdong.
Munjeongdong?
Yes. It'll be near the back of the Songpa Garak market, probably where the Special Forces Command used to be. It's close to Wiri Newtown, so the location is great.
It is a good location.
Yes, they are intentionally building it in a neighborhood where researchers can live comfortably. It's also close to Yangjae-dong.
Close to Yangjae-dong, yes?
So they mentioned they're building it there, but I guess you all forgot. Samsung Electronics also emphasized design and built their design team office near Yangjae-dong. So they're planning to attract talent in that area. If collaboration with Nvidia becomes more concrete, there could be more exchanges of people, which would change things. People keep asking why Hyundai isn't moving forward, focusing too much on robots.
Exactly.
There's nothing else, right? Today it seems that people were more focused on Naver, which has something different.
There was a bit more variety, yes.
I also hope it happens soon.
Right? I think everyone feels that way.
Everyone is eager for it.
Yes.
The price of 780,000 won went up too quickly back then.
That was Hyundai.
Yes.
Yes, if you can be a bit more patient.
Patience is necessary. There's no other way. I'm being patient too.
That wraps up our discussion on Hyundai. Looking at the market, Samsung Electronics had a bit of a shake-up early today, but the Kosdaq remained strong, rising about 3%. However, when Samsung Electronics showed sudden volatility, the Kosdaq weakened a bit. As we always say, it's better for the Kosdaq if Samsung Electronics rises steadily without too much decline.
It looks like it should move within plus or minus 1% today.
Plus or minus 1% without dropping too much.
Once it goes below minus 3%, it drops sharply.
So this week, since both confirmed results will be announced, we should briefly touch on how that might impact things.
Talking about LTA is crucial.
This time, LTA is very important.
If it comes out better than what Micron mentioned, I think the reaction will be positive.
What did Micron say earlier?
When Micron announced their results recently,
they provided specific.
They mentioned specific figures and clarified that they are not lowering prices but fixing them at current levels. So while they are defending against declines, they won't rise sharply either.
For smaller volumes, they will go with fixed.
Even so, the stock price can drop.
Exactly.
Micron, hasn't dropped as much as we have recently.
That's right.
It was very solid. In fact, yes, there is a disparity. We're just caught up in it. We need to address that. To do that, we need to communicate more proactively during our IR sessions. While I appreciate the chairman and CEO promoting it and giving a good ROI, we need to be more specific about how much we can share. We can't keep everything secret like how Alphabet did things, but there must be a way to approach it.
Roughly speaking,
Samsung or Hynix? What is Hynix?
Hynix has the share.
If Hynix doesn't say much, people will assume that Samsung Electronics won't say much the next day either.
Oh, so while the operating profit of several trillion is important,
That's not very important.
the LTA is more important when we talk.
The numbers are all out. They're all known.
60 trillion or so.
Just because it's more than 10 trillion doesn't mean it will go up. And breaking 60 trillion seems tough since the original estimate was around 65 trillion, but they lowered it. That's already the case.
Yes, that's about it.
So this time we need to talk a bit more specifically about the LTA rather than...
And it would be good to see some shareholder return plans as well.
Understood. It's 4:14 now. Many are asking for you to check the supply, CEO Kwon.
I sold it ambiguously at a loss of about 500 billion, yes.
I see.
It feels a bit uneasy selling like this. If it were a big drop, I'd be more negative tomorrow, but for now, it's not positive. I've been trying to focus on the positive aspects, but when foreign investors sell, it usually leads to a downturn the next day.
It's not positive right now.
Institutions seem to be a bit defensive, but since this isn't a major drop, it might not lead to a huge negative impact tomorrow. We could see a slight pullback or a lower start. This doesn't guarantee a clear direction. Sometimes people misunderstand and ignore this. On Friday, we saw it rally at the end.
Exactly.
So I was right in.
Yes, since it went up today, everyone's feeling it to some extent.
It's like flipping a coin anyway.
People are getting some help and references, so they're looking for the CEO around 410.
There are times when the direction is very clear, but right now it's a bit uncertain.
Yes, I understand. I'd like to ask the center director about this week. On Wednesday, we have Hynix, Thursday is Samsung Electronics, and in the US, Meta, Microsoft, and Amazon are all reporting.
Yes, that's
Right? These days, even if earnings are good, if there's debt or cash flow issues, the market reacts very sensitively.
exactly.
This is definitely a very...
Well, the current sentiment isn't very hopeful. The fact that Alphabet is viewed that way says a lot. Not everyone sees Alphabet negatively. Some bloggers and analysts in the US have a positive outlook. Some say Alphabet's earnings are inflated due to stakes in companies like SpaceX. But if someone made a smart early investment, why view that negatively? There are various opinions, but overall, the stock price reflects this.
Yes.
Other companies besides Alphabet will also focus on committing to capital expenditures.
Yes.
They will likely increase them. But the key is how investors react. They'll look at cash flow, ROI, ROIC, and backlog, and that makes the stock price uncertain. Overall, the stocks haven't crashed, but they're struggling to find momentum, with only Apple managing to do so.
Right, Apple.
So now it's frustrating there too. But you know what? The Nasdaq or the S&P 500, they've actually gone up since the beginning of the year. By how much? Less than 10%. So compared to the peak, it's only down about 8%. It hasn't really dropped much. If you want that kind of thing, you buy those stocks. We've gone up 60% now, but then it dropped.
American investors are confused because it's tricky to invest in places with low FCF, but at the same time, not investing feels tricky too. But Apple, with good FCF, looks appealing. Yet they lack growth. Should we see them as a consumer goods company, like Coca-Cola? It's a confusing situation.
Semiconductors are important for us.
So ideally, if FCF is important, we should buy semiconductors with good FCF. But the problem is, if they don't buy, then it doesn't work. And that's what's tangled up right now.
Yes.
That's right. So
Got it. It is...
we shouldn't be asked to forecast that.
I didn't ask for a forecast, just individual opinions. We'll handle the reference ourselves.
Digest it? Yes, you'll digest it.
The market has been unpredictable lately with a sidecar for 10 consecutive trading days, but it stopped today after 10 days. Wow, it's really something today.
Still, some stocks, especially in the Kosdaq, are rising and sectors that were overlooked are moving, which is a positive trend. But it feels like we're in the calm before the storm, or maybe right in the eye of the storm. Is it the eye of the storm? It feels like we're in it, which makes me a bit uneasy. I think it will be like this all week, so we need to get through it well.
I didn't mention it, but there is FOMC too.
FOMC doesn't really have any major issues.
But if they actually raise interest rates, that would be serious.
It would be a disaster.
The market is predicting a precautionary increase in September.
That's right.
Yes, are they going to pull it forward to July? If something unexpected happens, it could change again.
The FedWatch shows a 38% prediction, so it's not without basis.
That's right. 30% is quite high. 38% is significant.
That's not low.
Overall, most expect a freeze on rates.
There are many applications.
That's the general opinion in the market. I'm just mentioning that if there's a 20-30% chance of a high probability increase, we should consider that. With earnings reports and the FOMC coming up, it feels like we're in the eye of the storm.
Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. There's a lot going on Wednesday to Friday. Yeah, it's a super busy week packed into 3 days, but there's not much until tomorrow, right? Yes, until tomorrow. Let's keep an eye on Wednesday to Friday.
Yes, let's really pull together.
Yeah.
We can get through this.
We should definitely...
Sure, could you take a quick look at just one thing? Some people have been asking about LG Innotek and their results.
Came out well.
But it seems the stock price didn't reflect that today. They had over 10 trillion in sales for the first half, and the operating profit looks good. So why the stock price drop? Can you summarize that for us?
Originally, the estimate was around 180 billion, but it came out to 245.8 billion, which is a huge surprise. However, stock prices don't always align with performance.
It might reflect tomorrow, though.
There could be a delay in that. Delay in reflecting that. But IBIDEN also didn't do well today. 3.8%. Yeah, Apple is doing well, so that might balance things out. But LG Innotek's improvement is likely due to the camera module rather than the circuit board. But the important thing is that they still seem to be facing issues with the circuit board.
Yes.
Well, that's not really my area of expertise.
How was the circuit board overhaul today?
Not great.
It was not.
Samsung Electronics didn't move either.
Yeah.
And IBIDEN dropped about 3.8% today.
IBIDEN as well.
Yeah, but maybe that's affecting the mood. When was the announcement made? It seems like it came out around 2 p.m., right? About 2 p.m.
Yes.
It came out around 2 p.m. and the reaction wasn't that strong. It wasn't strong, but at 2 p.m. it spiked up and then came back down. If you look at the minute chart, it spiked after the announcement at 2:14 and then dropped again, but it did manage to reduce the loss.
Oh, still.
So if the market turns around tomorrow, Innotek might rebound again. Yes, if you...
Taking that into account. I understand. The overall sentiment for the circuit board, you mentioned IBIDEN, and whether these might react later is definitely something to watch. Director, what final thoughts do you have on the market?
I think it will remain in a
Calm.
Yeah. If foreigners sell a bit, it might dip, or it could slightly recover until tomorrow or the day after when Samsung and Hynix report their earnings.
Yes.
I think that's the trend. There was a significant positive factor, but not a huge one, and some negative sentiment. But in the end, it fluctuated and settled around this point.
Yeah.
If the US market rebounds tomorrow, that would help. But there will still be some caution after the FMC. If oil prices drop, it might change things, but it's not that straightforward. The ammunition has run out. It might dip a bit.
A lull.
It's a lull. So, as we mentioned earlier, Hyundai Rotem's performance isn't great, which has caused some issues. But aside from that, nothing special is happening.
Yes,
It seems quiet.
Understood. We have some important schedules packed for Wednesday to Friday, so we need to focus on those.
People will probably be a bit more passive.
Yes, I think they'll take a breather and observe. We appreciate your continued support. This week has a lot of important events, so we'll say goodbye to our two guests here today. Thank you, Director Kim Jang-reol and CEO Lee Kun-hee.
Yes, thank you.
Yes, see you tomorrow.